The rain fell with a desolate, whispering rhythm against the window panes of the silent apartment. Dust motes, suspended in the single sliver of weak sunlight that pierced the gray, danced in a morbid ballet. Wang Yibo sat on the floor, his back to the wall, a ghost in a place once filled with laughter. The public had moved on, their fleeting grief a distant echo in the cacophony of a new scandal. But for him, the world was a mute film, its sound ripped away the day the news broke. Menglong was gone. An accident, they said. A fall. A tragic, senseless end to a star that had burned too brightly. He didn't believe it. He couldn't. On the floor beside him, covered in a thin layer of dust, was a beat-up, old drone. It was an ancient model, a gift from Menglong years ago. "For when you want to fly, but don't want to leave the ground," he had said with a laugh, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Yibo had spent countless hours flying it, chasing the sunset, filming the city's pulse from above. The memories were shards of glass in his heart, glinting and cutting with every beat. He picked it up, the plastic cool and smooth against his fingertips. As his thumb brushed a seam he had never noticed before, a small panel clicked open. Hidden inside, nestled in a cavity barely bigger than a thumb, was a memory card. It was a digital ghost, a final whisper. His hands trembled as he slid it into his laptop. The file names were not random. They were fragments of a poem they had both loved, a verse about secrets buried in the earth. The first file was named The. The next, Truth. The next, Is. The final file, Inside. A cold, certain fury began to bloom in his chest, a fire that had been smoldering beneath the ash of his grief. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. Menglong, in his final moments, had known. And he had spoken to Yibo in a language only they shared. He worked for days, a phantom in his own home, existing only on coffee and a singular, burning purpose. The files were a nightmare of corruption and encryption. But Yibo was not just an artist. He was a master of puzzles, of code, of the digital labyrinth. He saw the logic in the chaos, the pattern in the corrupted data. He used his knowledge, the sleepless nights spent building and coding for fun, to fight the silence. And then, he found it. A hidden, nested file. It was a video log. Menglong's face, tired and serious, filled the screen. "Yibo," he began, his voice a low, resonant hum. The sound was a shock, a jolt of electricity to Yibo's system. He was so used to silence. "If you are watching this, it means they finally caught me. The they is irrelevant now, but the why is what matters. It's about Ascension, the project. They found out. They didn't want the truth revealed. They would do anything to stop it." Menglong's voice was calm, but his eyes held a desperate fire. He spoke of a secret project, a piece of art that he had been working on, a multimedia sculpture that was to expose the deep-seated corruption within their industry, the exploitation of young artists, the falsification of data, the hidden abuses. The project was called Ascension, because he wanted to believe they could rise above it all. He had been close to completion, but they found out. The video showed snippets of coded data, encrypted schematics, and frantic notes. "I've sent a copy of the final data to an offline server. The key is in the music. My final piece. The one I never got to release. You know it. It's the one we always laughed about, the one with the hidden beat, the one they said was unmarketable. They think they've erased it, but they're wrong. You, and only you, will hear the truth." The video ended. Yibo sat there, the screen dark, the weight of the world on his shoulders. The cold fury turned into a roaring inferno. His friend was not a victim of fate. He was a martyr for the truth. And Yibo, the quiet, reserved artist, was now the guardian of that truth. He re-emerged from his solitude, not with a press conference, but with a single social media post, a stark, black image with a single word. Justice. The online world exploded. The fans, who had respected his silence, now had a focal point for their questions, their fears. The industry, however, was silent. A dangerous, watchful silence. The old studio heads, the powerful executives, they knew what this meant. They knew Yibo. He wasn't one to speak without reason. Yibo's next move was a shockwave. He announced a live performance. Not a big concert, not a tour. A single one-night show, in an obscure underground venue they had once found together. The demand for tickets was insane, but he limited it to a small, private audience. The performance was titled Ascension. The night of the show, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation and a heavy, somber tension. The stage was bare, just a single screen behind him. He stepped out, a figure in all black, his face a mask of serene resolve. The music began. It was the piece. The one Menglong had talked about. The one they had created together in secret. The track began with a slow, mournful melody, a piano solo that sounded like falling tears. As the beat dropped, Yibo began to dance. But this was no ordinary performance. This was a story told in motion. Every movement was a word, every spin a sentence. He moved with a brutal, visceral grace, his body a conduit for a storm of grief, anger, and defiance. The poetic language that had filled their secret world was now manifested in his art. The stage, the lights, the very air in the room, seemed to bend to his will. As the music built, the screen behind him came to life. It was a live feed of him dancing, but superimposed over it were cryptic symbols, fragments of code that only a few people would ever recognize. The symbols swirled and morphed with his movements, like a living, breathing accusation. Then, a new layer appeared. It was a visual representation of the data Menglong had left behind. Numbers, names, and transactions began to flash across the screen, moving too fast for the naked eye to capture, but the emotional impact was undeniable. The climax of the performance was a moment of pure, mind-blowing revelation. As the music reached its crescendo, the beat that they had hidden, the one they said was unmarketable, dropped. It was a glitch, a stutter, a rhythmic anomaly that was meant to be a key. In that exact moment, the chaotic visuals on the screen froze. Every single file, every piece of evidence, every code he had painstakingly deciphered, was laid bare for the world to see. It was all there. A single, devastating accusation, projected for all to witness. The camera panned to the audience. He saw faces of shock, of comprehension, of dawning horror. The music faded, leaving only the low thrum of the sound system. Yibo stood motionless on the stage, his chest heaving. The video of Menglong, the one from the hidden log, appeared on the screen, full-sized. Menglong looked straight at the camera, straight at the world, and gave a small, wry smile. "I'm sorry, my friend. I guess I'm a bit late for our flight." A collective gasp went through the room. Yibo, his eyes glistening, broke his stoic facade. He walked to the edge of the stage, bowed deeply, and then, in a voice that was both a prayer and a demand, he spoke. "The truth is not in the headlines. It is in the silence. It is in the art that you try to bury. This," he gestured to the screen behind him, "is for my friend. This is his final masterpiece. This is for Menglong." The triumph had been a quiet one. The world had roared in its wake, the reverberations of justice shaking the foundations of an industry built on whispers and shadows. For Wang Yibo, it was not a victory celebration, but a moment of profound, exhausted peace. The grief was still a constant companion, but it no longer held him hostage. The ghost of Menglong's death had been laid to rest, its truth revealed for all to see. He had done what was right, and now a new silence settled in, one that felt like the calm after a storm. But the calm was an illusion. The first sign was a flicker. On a late-night call with his manager, a sudden, dissonant chime rang from his phone. It wasn't a notification. It was a single, pure tone, an old-fashioned ringtone that belonged to a type of phone no longer in use. He hung up and checked his call history. There was nothing. A glitch, he told himself, but a cold unease settled in his stomach. The next day, he found a photo on his laptop desktop, a picture he had never saved. It was a close-up of a digital drawing he had worked on years ago, a piece of art that was nothing more than a series of swirling lines and geometric patterns. He had dismissed it then as a failed experiment, an abstract thought he couldn't quite articulate. But now, nestled within the lines, was a faint, almost invisible signature. A single symbol he recognized with a jolt that sent a tremor through his entire body. It was a symbol Menglong had once drawn on a napkin, a circle with a jagged line running through it. A symbol of a broken connection. It began slowly, almost imperceptibly. A corrupted file here, a strange pop-up there. The glitches were too specific, too personal to be random. They were not malicious, They were deliberate. They were messages. Messages from beyond the grave, from a digital shadow of his friend that was still fighting a war Yibo thought he had won. The cold certainty that had fueled his first quest for justice now returned, not as a raging fire, but as a chilling dread. Menglong's video message had been a warning, but what if it was also a test? A key to a door Yibo didn't even know existed. He remembered a line from one of Menglong's last cryptic texts, a text he had dismissed as a morbid joke. "The truth you found, Yibo, is just the ground floor. The real lie is in the basement." Driven by this new mystery, he began to re-examine everything. The corrupted files from the drone, the schematics, the notes. He spent days, then weeks, in a solitary, obsessive dive into the digital abyss. He found nothing new, but he began to see new connections. A pattern in the encryption keys. An echo of a signature code within the corrupted data. It was like looking at a constellation and finally seeing the lines that connect the stars. It was all a single, sprawling work. Ascension wasn't just a project. It was a multi-layered attack. The data he had released was the first stage, a public distraction. The real target was something far, far bigger. He finally reached out, not to his manager or his team, but to the only person he could think of, a reclusive tech genius named Kai, who Menglong had mentioned in a passing conversation years ago. A man who was blacklisted from the tech world, a legend in the dark corners of the internet for a code he had supposedly created that could unmake any network. Yibo found him living in a derelict warehouse, surrounded by a maze of servers and monitors, a hermit in a digital world. Kai was a man of few words, his eyes holding a cynical weariness that spoke of long battles fought and lost. "You're asking me to help you finish your dead friend's work," he said, his voice a low rasp. "What makes you think his work is finished?" "Because the glitches won't stop," Yibo said simply. "They're getting smarter. They're coming from inside my systems." Kai's eyes, dull moments before, suddenly sharpened. He ran a diagnostic, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed that was almost a blur. He didn't speak for a long time, his face a mask of concentration. Then he looked at Yibo, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "It's not a virus. It's a key. A beacon," he called it. "The data you released, the initial exposé, was a beacon to lure them out. And they're here. They know who you are now." They were fighting against something called the Conduit. It was not a company, not a corporation, but a network, a distributed intelligence that controlled the flow of information in their world. It was a phantom, an entity that had a hand in everything, from media narratives to the careers of artists. They had wanted to silence Menglong not because of the exposé, but because Ascension threatened the very core of their existence. Menglong's final, secret project was to create a counter-network, a kind of digital anti-gravity that would dismantle their system from the inside out. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, a frantic race against an unseen enemy. Yibo and Kai worked side by side, their minds a perfect, if unusual, symbiosis. Kai, the architect of code, Yibo, the master of patterns and rhythm. They found the final beat Menglong had mentioned in his video. It wasn't just a musical anomaly. It was a sequence, a rhythmic code that was the key to accessing Menglong's final creation, a program he had built to break into the Conduit's core. The final confrontation would not be on a stage, but in the heart of the digital world. Kai had found the location of the Conduit's master server, a heavily guarded fortress hidden in plain sight, a server farm disguised as a high-tech data storage facility. But they couldn't just walk in. They had to get past a sophisticated AI security system, a digital guardian so advanced it could anticipate and adapt to any attack. "It's a digital duel," Kai said, a glint in his eye. "It's not about brute force. It's about outsmarting it. The AI is a perfect reflection of the Conduit. It's built on logic, on predictable patterns. Your friend's genius, and your genius, Yibo, is that you are a creator. You operate on chaos, on emotion. That's your weapon." The plan was a high-wire act of breathtaking audacity. They would infiltrate the facility, and while Kai worked to physically connect to the master server, Yibo would distract and disable the AI. He wouldn't use code. He would use art. He would use dance. Kai had built a custom interface, a glove and headset that would translate Yibo's movements into a digital signature, a live performance within the AI's core. The night of the mission was a storm-swept spectacle. Yibo, clad in black, his face a mask of cold concentration, was a ghost in the rain. They slipped past the physical security, a choreographed ballet of silent movements and technological mastery. Inside, the server room was a cathedral of light and sound, the hum of processors a constant, low thrum. The master server stood in the center, a monolith of gleaming steel and wires. "Yibo, you're on," Kai whispered from his terminal. "Once I'm in, the AI will lock on to me. You have to be its sole focus. You have to make it chase you."